Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to episode 32 of the Hardly Millennial Podcast, where we are young, dumb, and full of
opinion.
opinions, ladies and gentlemen. Across from me today is not the usual Matthew Lynn, but instead I have Justin Lunsford today. How are you doing, Justin?
Howdy, feeling good, very cozy.
Good. I'm glad you're cozy, man. So today we're actually going to just kind of go off with like what Matthew and I have been doing with some of the more philosophical or hypothetical questions.
Can't
Those are
wait.
usually a lot of fun, and I think it's going to be really fun having Justin here to give his opinions on it. But actually, before we get into that, there's something else I wanted to talk about, and it was something that you brought up with me this morning, and it was would you call it childism?
Childism, yes.
Childism. So why don't you explain what this story is first, and then we'll talk about it a little bit.
Okay, where I came across the term childism, which is a new ism. I thought I knew all the isms already. Well, they were interviewing. It was C-SPAN or some kind of news network of some kind. They were interviewing a non-binary, so gender fluid, I suppose, woman who was raising two children with two other people who are also non-binary or gender fluid or transgender. I don't know the specifics of each one. I'm not saying they're all the same thing. I just don't know the specific.
Okay.
So, the he mother or she dad of these children was mentioning that assigning gender-specific pronouns to a child at birth is childism because you are automatically assuming that just because a child is a child, it does not have the capacity to decide whether or not it is a boy or a girl. So instead, they would assign them, they, their pronouns, which sounds ridiculous, but whatever. Apparently somewhere there's a loophole in the English language that makes it okay. So...
Well, didn't you say that they are presenting this child as like neither a boy or a girl?
Right, yes, they are withholding whether or not this child was born with male or female genitalia in order to get people to treat this child like a gender-neutral being so that it could decide, whatever, could decide on its own what it wanted to be.
Okay. So what I wanted to ask you about that, or what I wanted to get your opinion on in regards to that is, so obviously we have the age limit for a reason, right? So like after 18, you're no longer considered a minor, right? 18
Right.
and beyond. So before then, 18 and younger, your parents basically have full control over you and your decisions.
Correct.
And how you go about things, whatever it is. So based off of that information, is it okay? Do you think it's okay for parents to make this decision for their children in regards to how they wish to present their child? Or do you think this is something that's much more serious that should actually be maybe a law, or maybe like against it? Like, is it okay for a parent to make that decision that we're going to treat our child as an ambiguous being until they decide what they want to be?
Well, it's hard because you don't really know until you see an outcome whether or not this is something that's going to be harmful or not beneficial. So what I would say is no, it is not against the law. There shouldn't be a law against it until we realize that it's caused serious damage.
Right.
Okay, because it's not intentional. Okay, but what I think should happen personally is see what happens, see what, how the child fares. And then later on, I think they should be able to press charges against their family for causing them a great amount of distress.
That the child can.
Oh, absolutely.
At what age do you think it's appropriate for a child? So like
I'm going to stick by 18. I'm going to stick by 18 for everybody.
So so let's say a child decides at 14 that like, fuck my parents, how fucking dare they do this kind of shit to me, like they fucked me up, whatever it is. And then when they turn 18, they can say, I'm filing a lawsuit against my parents for doing this to me.
Right. Just like a child who is not 18, who is fallen victim to domestic abuse or something like that, there is an advocate for the child if the child does report that he has been, or she has been, or they or there, whatever,
Right.
has been abused. So I would treat it just like child abuse. Absolutely.
Do you think there's a difference between gender and sex?
I do not. I think that there are variations of gender. I think there are deviations of people who don't want to fit within their gender. But I think that gender roles have evolved over time for a reason. There are things that men are good at that women are not, and there are most definitely things that women are good at that men are not. Having worked in an environment filled with mostly women, there are some things that come very naturally to women that I really admire and I wish that I could do. And I find that because of my being a male, I am not gifted at those. Now, there are males that are, okay? But you do not make a rule or a accepted generalization, I guess, based on an exception. An exception is an exception. They should be protected, they should be considered, but you do not write the rule or the law around them.
Gotcha. Okay, I agree with you on that. I just thought that was an interesting story you brought up to me this morning, so I just felt the need to bring that up.
I am a very proud childist. I am an intelligent adult, but was a stupid child, as all of us were.
Right.
And I'm very glad that we are not left up to our own devices.
Yes, I do agree with that, especially thinking back.
How old is a child when they think they're going to run away, really? 10?
Yeah.
Okay.
10 or 11, yeah.
How capable is a 10 or 11-year-old?
Not capable at all.
Right. So we're going to let them decide if they're a boy or a girl?
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Well, and that's what I've always just thought was like, it's one thing to let your child to decide, based off of these new quote unquote rules that are being written within our, society in regards to gender fluidity. It's one thing to let them decide if they want to be a boy or girl. It's another thing if like your little girl at the age of 12 is like, I want to be a boy, and you start buying fucking pills for them to make that transition.
Oh, absolutely.
Self-expression
is one thing. If your 6-year-old boy is watching his mother put makeup on, and he just naturally feels the desire to try makeup on, well, then he can. Put it on him. Let him put it on himself. If he wants to wear it out of the house, he can. Then he is going to decide whether or not he likes the way that he's treated or likes the attention that he's getting, and if it's worth wearing it. And then by all means, that right there builds character.
Plus, I think it's weird that the first thing that parents are jumping to these days is my child thinks he's a different gender, right? So using the example of like a little boy, because what's happening right now is just as you said. If like all of a sudden you find that your son has this infatuation with wearing makeup or wearing a certain type of clothing or whatever it is, the number one thought it seems like that's jumped to now is my child wants to be a girl, and maybe even the child is voicing this to an extent,
right?
But me as a parent, if my 12-year-old boy was doing this, the first thing I would think of is, oh, my boy is gay. And he just hasn't, figured that part out yet. And this is how he's expressing that until he figures that out.
But, even if you decide maybe he's gay, but I don't want him wearing makeup, even that is a discipline your child is going to learn. There are some things that just come with living in your parents' household that you have to do because they're your parents and they said so, that helps you learn a certain level of respect and discipline.
And I agree with you. And I think a big issue today is we're letting the kids have too much power.
Absolutely.
And saying, well, if this is the way my child thinks the house should be ran, then that's the way we're going to do it. It's like, no, that's because what's going to happen? That child's going to grow going out in the world and thinking, oh, well, everything's going to evolve around me. Right. Instead of, oh, I have to assimilate to whatever standard society places there for me.
I'm not saying that children are stupid. Okay, children are very intelligent. When you take away all these biases, take away all the bias that we've, developed over time becoming adults, we lose a lot of that ability to see the forest for the trees, okay? Right. Whereas children, they have that ability. They're able to see what's right in front of them, and they're very blunt. But children are also really dumb.
Yeah.
Because they just don't have experience. So there are some things that we can learn from children, but more importantly, there are things that children need to learn from us, and they take much longer.
Yeah. I would definitely agree with that. It's an interesting and slippery slope, but you know, I mean, just as you said, we're just not going to know until these kids grow up and then see how it exactly. Because who knows? Maybe that's the fucking best way to go about it. Maybe these kids grow up like fucking, free living spirits and very intelligent, and maybe they live happier lives because of how they were raised.
But give your children. I mean, my growing up was not particularly easy,
right?
But I'm really glad there were some social norms that I was able to conform to in order to simply fit in a world that is already extremely confusing.
Right.
So at least give your children the opportunity to fit in to the normality of society, and then let them further express themselves later. And just make sure it follows your parameters. Some parents are really liberal about letting their children just kind of express themselves with clothing and doing whatever they want, which is fine because you're going to encounter people in the world that oppose that or that aren't quite as liberal, and that is how you learn. That's experience. That's not something that you can just be taught. So give them the opportunity to be normal, because there's always a chance to be weird.
Right.
We've all had a weird point in our lives.
Yeah,
I definitely had.
We've all had a phase.
Absolutely, and it was weird and sometimes very embarrassing. But you learn from it, and there's a reason why you either are continuing that trend or lifestyle, whatever now, or you're not.
Right. Nope, I agree with you. All right, cool. Well, thank you for clearing that up for me.
I'm glad someone cleared it up.
To kind of segue too into some of these questions, you brought up how you thought kids are very intelligent,
right?
But what they lack is experience, right? So, what do you think is more useful? Do you think intelligence or wisdom is more useful?
Well, wisdom is what's going to keep you alive.
Okay.
In my opinion, wisdom is what's going to help you manage stress in your life. Okay, accepting things that you just cannot change, that's wise. Okay, intelligence is being able to see why these things are wrong and able to make a strategy to change them. Okay, so intelligence is going to help you rise to the top. Wisdom is going to keep you alive. So at the end of the day, I would say wisdom is more important. I know some very unintelligent people who buy homes, who are very happy, okay? But it's people who are wise. It does not take an intelligent person to understand that if you plant trees in your backyard, you will always have food.
Right. True.
Okay? It takes a wise person to realize that. It doesn't take an intelligent person to learn that if you learn how to fish, it's better than someone giving you fish. It's the old, you can teach them how to fish, you can give them fish, or
it's
whatever.
Funny, we literally just talked about that yesterday.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Well, I'm a little behind. I guess I should have been up on that.
But we just brought up that same, what is it, a proverb, an idiom, one of those?
It's a proverb, because it's probably literally from Proverbs in the Bible. But I would say wisdom, and wisdom is achieved usually through experience,
right? Yeah.
Which is why you don't have wisdom growing up and a child will just fucking die.
Yeah, that's true.
But you can have a strangely intelligent child, especially how these children can learn through languages at the same time. That's not going to keep them alive for the rest of their life, but it will help them rise.
Yeah, that's true. Well, and I think it comes back to, because what we just called it growing up was like you're either book smart or street smart.
No, you're not either. Right. But you could be book smart or street smart or both.
Well, I feel like that was just our way of kind of defining like intelligence and wisdom, right? Because it was the sense of like we knew people where, and I think we've all known the people who do super well in school, get, A's every time. I mean, you were one of them. I would argue that you had, both the street and the book smarts. But I think there are people out there who had like the book smarts, but you'd be like, oh, you just wouldn't last in the real world though, because you just don't get how it fucking works.
Yeah, but that has nothing to do with being street smart or school smart. That has to do with how much you had to be on the street. You can't be street smart if you'd never had any type of street experience.
I guess we weren't using street smart as quite as a literal term. I think it was just like I said. I think we were using it more as like an intelligence versus wisdom,
resourcefulness versus like knowledge acquisition.
Yeah, like common sense versus being able to pass a test.
Oh, that's all intelligence.
Is that all intelligence?
We just choose where we want to apply the intelligence. All of that is intelligence. You don't have wisdom growing up, so wisdom is not street smarts. It's literally just intelligence. If a kid who is 12 who has no access to a bong looks around his house and he finds things to make a bong and it's functional and he had no model to look at it or anything like that, that is an equal amount of smarts as to a kid who's going to grow up and learn how to solve a calculus equation, no problem.
Right.
Okay, it's the same kind of ingenuity. It's using something you've already learned before and applying it to better your situation now, the generalization of facts and knowledge. It's all intelligence.
Okay.
It's applying knowledge. That's what intelligence is.
Right.
It's that person who learns a concept in math class and then passes it on the test, passes the class, and then never thinks about how that's going to apply to their life. That's someone who is acquiring knowledge, but not really applying it to create any kind of wisdom or anything like that. That's not an intelligent person. That's regurgitating information. It's a parrot.
Yeah, true.
And those exist for sure. Lots of them.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm kind of confused at what you mean though. So you mean that there are people out there who will like learn these things, know them very well, but won't apply them in the correct way? Or because I look at it as like one thing that always bothered me with school, and I was not I was an average student, but I definitely had classes I failed and shit like that. And specifically math, one thing that always bothered me with math was learning all of these equations or ways to figure out things, and my argument was always, when the fuck am I ever going to use this in my daily life? And even today, I don't find myself I find myself applying simple addition, subtraction, division, and multiplication, but when it comes to some of these like long algorithms or algebraic expressions, whatever it was, I don't apply those at all.
Well, you would have if you would have. It comes down to choice. If you would have chosen a path that led you into that.
Right.
So it's not that you are not intelligent.
Right.
You're very intelligent. I've seen you do some things that require intelligence for sure. But I mean, the amount of the application of knowledge of space-time continuum, stuff like that, those are things that some people who are a lot more educated can't quite grasp.
I see.
You choose to put your efforts there, and that's ours to choose.
Right.
Okay, but you're not letting it go nowhere. When you learn a new concept, you can apply it to space. You can apply it to,
Yeah, that is true. I did the best in math when I was doing astronomy classes and had to apply math to, space shit.
Exactly.
But okay, I get that.
So you're not regurgitating information. You're able to apply information.
Right.
Okay, so you're able to take the knowledge and apply it. You're intelligent. You're not just regurgitating a fact.
Right.
I meet a lot of people who are great parrots and they can recite, theorems and everything beautifully, and then, pass a test and go on and never resource any of that knowledge again in the rest of their lives. And that to me is a lack of intelligence.
Well, it's funny you bring that up, because I think I think I spoke to somebody about this, not on a podcast though, but because I think that's exactly what is wrong right now, is we have all this information available to us, and I think you have a lot, kind of a little like setup here. I've talked to you before where one of the biggest issues I think people have is nobody listens to each other, right? So what happens a lot of the times when you're having debates or conversations with people is, instead of the opposite person listening to you, what they're really doing is they're formulating a response in their head of what to say when you're done talking.
Yes.
So there's no listening, it's just talking at each other back and forth. And I think that's an issue we have right now, where there are people who just will go online, and read 3, 4, maybe they read 10 articles, about something. But at the same time, though, they're not taking that information and I think using the right side of their brain to interpret it, and
apply it.
And apply it the way they should be. All they do is if somebody says, no, well, this is like this, all they can do is pull the information from the 4 articles they read and just regurgitate it instead of finding things from that person's point of view or perspective.
So unfortunately, the actual art of listening or the skill of listening, we dismiss that very, very early on in a child's education, in this country anyway.
Do we?
Yeah. We talk about reading comprehension a lot, but we don't talk a lot about actual listening. You don't see any tests where someone is sitting across from another person and they are being told information, and then they have to repeat back information. And the reason that I know this is because my dad... he is a fireman, higher rank now, but fireman when I was younger. And, when you grow up, you listen to things get read to you and then you answer questions. As you get older, you start reading these long paragraphs for like standardized testing. And then you answer back and you can go back and you can always reference this paragraph or this essay that you're reading so that you can further answer these questions, okay? But we don't have any testing that requires us to listen to someone talk to us and then answer a question. So when I took the test to become a fireman, I did fantastic on everything written.
Right.
But the listening portion, which I'm actually a really good listener, it was strange to me how hard this listening portion was. I didn't have any ability to go back and reference the information presented to me. I had to listen really well one time. And that is because we are conditioned to come back with a great rhetorical answer.
Right, we're taught to debate.
Right, exactly. So we're getting the argument ready in our head, and we're shooting ourselves in the foot because we're not technically, in our quote unquote, reading the article before we're actually answering the questions. So
So, well, I was just going to say, so in that situation, so I'm assuming, somebody, for this test, somebody was just spitting off information at you.
One time,
and then you had to write. So,
well, what happened was you were listening to a call with a dispatcher.
Okay.
Okay, and then you had to answer questions about where you're going, what they need, what the problem is. And it was like 5 questions you had to answer based on this 2.5 minute conversation with the dispatcher.
Gotcha. So you're somebody who I revere as not only being extremely intelligent, but just as you said, a very good listener. So what was it? I mean, I understand you were younger at the time, but so what was it when you were listening to this call take place that you were having issues because you're somebody who I've always known to be really good at retaining information.
Yeah, exactly.
So what was different about this particular instance that made you realize that, I was never taught at that point how to listen, correctly?
One, it was recording. I couldn't ask them to repeat anything.
Okay.
I couldn't ask for clarification on something like I can with you.
Right.
So say our verbiage is just different.
Right.
I can ask you to, repeat something with different verbiage in order for me to understand it quite better. Or I can ask you a question about it that kind of can clear it up. So in a conversational standpoint, we're able to do that a little bit more. But in a debate or... say you go into politics and you have presidential debates or vice president, whatever, you're not really able to have someone clarify. It makes you look not quite as intelligent as the other person. Like what you didn't understand how I said it. You have to make me re-say it so you can understand it. So, which is valid. That's true. It does make you look less intelligent. So you should be able to retain all that information. So even me as someone who prides themselves in being able to do that, I lack the not so much anymore. I've gotten better at it because I that was a wake-up call to me. But at the time, I just lacked this ability to fully immerse myself and just listen and absorb the information that way.
So do you think listening then is more so taking exactly what the person says at face value, or do you think somebody listening should take further steps to analyze and interpret exactly what the person meant. And I mean, let me give you an example here. I'm somebody who I feel I'm notorious for this, and all of you and my friends have been very kind with me with this, where there's a lot of times that maybe I don't explain things very well, but you guys know what I mean. So you guys don't feel the need to like go back and say like, oh, you're talking about this or you're talking about that. Or I don't have to go back and like re-explain myself in a different way because you guys take the time to interpret what I'm saying and know this is what Adam means, right?
Yeah.
So do you think that that's something that people should practice more with, like going to politics, for example?
Right.
You know, I think we have this conversation about Trump a lot, where Trump, we can all agree, is a fucking idiot with how he speaks. He's not a good public speaker at all. Oh, be careful with slamming your feet. But he's not somebody who's necessarily a great speaker, but I think the difference is you have one side that's taking what he's saying at face value, and you have another side that's taking what he's saying and saying, oh, well, you guys are misinterpreting it. He actually means this, or this is clearly what he means. So what's more important? Should Trump be better at, make a point to be better spoken and be better defined in what he's talking about? Or should people take more steps to try to analyze and interpret what somebody means with what they're saying?
Oh, great question. Well, first, I think it really depends on the setting. Okay, so you and I know each other really well. I feel like it's part of my responsibility to understand the way that you speak and understand whether or not you are how you wish to come off or what you really meant by what you said, okay? That's a friend's job. Otherwise, you don't end up really being friends if you can't figure that one out.
Right.
Okay? As far as Trump or a professional setting like that, I think there's a little bit of responsibility to go around. So my philosophy, we'll just start with Trump, okay? I think a president is responsible for so many things. He has so many hats to wear. He does not wear the role model hat. I don't think he's a horrible role model, but he does not wear that hat well or easily.
Okay.
And I don't care.
Okay.
Because I think the most important thing for a president to be is a policy maker, someone or a decision maker. Okay. And as far as I'm concerned with how it goes with the Constitution and relates back to me, those parts are sound for me. I know people are going, how can you say that? How can you possibly come across as someone who supports him when you're a gay man? And because gay is not in the Constitution. I'm so sorry. Okay. It's important that my rights are heard. I wish that the entire world would accept that. Okay, but when it comes down to it, we need to protect our Constitution. It's the only way to make sure that we are all treated equally. I believe in rules. Okay. Because rules are the same across the board. At least they should be.
Right.
So when Trump speaks, as long as it's not going against our conversation, I'm going to let it pass and just chalk it up to he's a little bit of an idiot sometimes when it comes to Twitter.
I mean, if it doesn't go against our Constitution.
Yeah, as long as everything that he's saying is constitutionally sound, any policy that he makes, any joke that he makes, it's not a threat to the values of our country as far as it is written, not as far as someone wants to interpret it in their heart. Okay? I don't care about what's in your heart.
Right.
Your heart is not in our Constitution.
Right.
I don't want anyone's heart in our Constitution.
Okay. So in the case of like politics, you think it's just more important to just what they say at face value instead of interpreting it?
Absolutely. Whether it's interpreting it well, for something better or for something worse. Listen to the words. Don't utilize your right to interpret the tone, because everyone can interpret the tone in a different way. When he was saying America first, he meant that as Americans, we should put America first. He wasn't referring back to some Nazi time where people were saying that. He wasn't referring to murdering people or anything stupid like that. He was referring to putting our needs first because we are our country.
Right.
Okay? Take it for what it is. So if he says something that clearly sounds racist or something like that, To me, that's when you call someone racist. I personally have not heard him say anything that to me was blatantly racist.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's not blatantly racist, it's not racist because racist has a definition. Okay, so it just depends who it is. If your children say, I hate you, do you take that at face value?
No, I guess not.
No, you say, well, you're an idiot and go to your room.
Right.
I love you no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it just depends on the situation. And I think that takes wisdom.
I like how you circled back there.
Yeah.
Okay, touche.
See, I'm intelligent, right? I used a concept we spoke of earlier, and I circled it back to a concept later in order to better our lives. And
No,
something.
you absolutely did. You absolutely did. Another question I have that I think falls along kind of these same lines of what we were talking about, and given how much I know you, I'm actually curious how you go about this. What 2 questions would you ask to get the most information about who a person truly is? So let's say you just meet a stranger, you've never met this person before in your life, never had interactions with this person. Mm-hmm. What 2 questions do you ask them to get like the best sense of who that person is?
Do you believe in a higher power?
Okay.
That's probably the one. And either way they answer that does not necessarily make them a good or bad person. It really just gives you a sense of where their accountability is. Okay.
Interesting.
So I think one of them would be, do you believe in a higher power? And the second question, what a crazy thing to be asked, just...
Trust me, there's a lot of these.
Yeah.
There's a lot of these we ask each other. We're like, wow, I've never fucking thought of that before. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I agree with your first one, though. I think that's a good one. But I'm curious what your second question would be.
The second one would be...
Take as much time as you need.
Okay, I would say... Do you believe that everybody should contribute for the greater good?
Okay.
Or do you believe that everyone should be able to choose where they contribute?
So you're basically asking, are you a socialist or are you a capitalist kind of thing, right?
Yeah, in some way.
Or like what values?
I want to know how much of anyone's life they feel should be mandated. I think that's the thing is I don't really want it to be a political answer.
Right.
I don't want it to be a political answer. I'm curious.
Because
neither one makes you a good or a bad person.
Right. But I mean, well, that's why I was interested because there was something I read once that said it was like a poll that was actually like, hey, what questions do you ask, somebody? This was talking about like dates, when you go on a date with somebody. And one of the questions that's most commonly asked now, and I think you actually know this from living in LA, because I think this was kind of the standard in Los Angeles.
I hate this question.
Is what's your political affiliation, right? Are you a Democrat or are you a Republican? I was asked that many times in my time of living in Los Angeles.
You,
yeah.
And I'm so sorry.
So you don't think that that's something that should be, as far as the first 2 questions you ask somebody, you don't think that holds weight at all?
Well, it's not going to tell you a whole lot about the person. It's more or less going to tell you, depending on how old they are, how are you raised?
I don't think so, because I think first of all, I agree with you. Like I wouldn't in the sense of like I wouldn't personally ask the question, you Democrat, Republican, simply because I don't care, right? Mm-hmm. But we live in a time now where both sides have, it's not to say that both sides are extreme, but both sides have very opposing values and opposing ideals that I don't agree with it, but I almost understand why that would be a question. Because, for example, if you ask somebody, are you a Republican or a Democrat, and they respond Republican, for example, right? Typically, if somebody responds Republican, oh, well, that person's against abortions, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas if somebody's like, oh, I'm Democrat, that person's ideals align with pro-choice. Now it varies how extreme both of those ideals go.
Right.
But that's usually the core and the base.
Well, okay, so if you're asking me what I would legitimately ask someone when I met them, I suppose a political affiliation, even though I wouldn't really want that to be, could be one. But I'm just thinking, to really get a sense of who someone is, what should we ask? Because if someone believes in a higher power of any kind, that's already going to tell you how they feel in ballpark about things like abortion.
True.
Okay.
Well, will it though? Because, like, for example, I know, I can't use me as an example because I'm different, but like, I believe in a higher power. I argue you believe in a higher power. Maybe we don't call it God, right?
Right.
We call it something else. But
Allah. Just
Allah.
kidding.
That was good. Nicely placed. Nicely placed. But there are people out there who I know believe in like a higher power, but still have, strong stances for or against abortion. So I know people who believe in a higher power, but are pro-choice still.
Oh,
right?
yeah, so do I. Well,
and vice versa.
I believe in a higher power, and I'm pro-choice, but I am anti-abortion.
Right.
I don't think you should be told how to conduct yourself. But at the same time, I think that it is wrong to kill something because you made a mistake. So I can judge you for having one, but I don't think the law should stop you from getting one. I don't think the law should stop a doctor from performing one if they want to. I believe that should also be left up to the free market of, say, choice. Okay.
Right.
So,
I agree with you on those fronts about abortion. But what I'm saying though is, would the question then of whether or not you believe in a higher power really set kind of a core a core value system for them? I would actually argue that instead of asking, do you believe in a higher power, ask them, are you religious, right? Do you believe in God?
I don't think that's a good one.
Because wouldn't that tell you something more than just, do you believe in a higher power? Because higher power can be interpreted as a lot of things.
But I'm not religious, but I believe in a higher power, and I think that's going to give you two very different... I believe in accountability, and that's because I believe in a higher power. So you don't necessarily have to feel like you've sinned, but you do, if you believe in a higher power, you do need to understand that whatever action that you make sends a reaction into the universe that is now going to, affect as a ripple effect, I guess, to the people around you. So at that point, you need to decide if an abortion, which in my mind, a lot of the time, not every time, I do understand where abortion is necessary. I truly do. Whether an abortion is, something that you want to do and put that energy out there. Okay, that was a growing thing inside of you that was developing a heartbeat, which the heart produces the most amount of energy of anything on this planet. Okay, you are now ending that possibility. So you are changing the way that the world works if you believe in this higher power, if you believe in that universe.
So if somebody tells you, if you ask somebody, do you believe in a higher power, and that person tells you, no, I do not, what does that tell you about that person?
Significantly less accountability for their actions, okay? So, but that's why you asked the next question that I said, because that determines what level of accountability you feel like you have to the people around you. Okay, because if you don't believe in a higher power, people are the only thing that you have any type of accountability to.
Right.
And that could be an infinite amount of ways to, behave in this life. But I feel like those will narrow it down the most broadly. And this is from a philosophical standpoint. This is not from what I would ask if I was in a room with people drinking wine.
Right. I understand. But so it sounds like to you how accountability is very important of somebody's character.
I think accountability shapes every decision you make.
Okay.
And the decisions that you make who you are.
Because it's based off of whether you're doing something for yourself or other people, right?
It's based on whether you care how anyone else is affected.
Okay. So those are the two questions you would ask. Do you believe in a higher power?
And do you believe in universal contribution for the greater welfare, or do you believe in the ability to contribute where you choose?
Okay. So that kind of leads me into the it's interesting you bring up accountability because I'm reading this next question. I think it actually falls in those same kind of lines of why do we judge ourselves by our intentions but judge others by their actions?
Because you don't know their intentions.
Do you think we should make a point to know their intentions before judging them on their actions?
As often as possible, unless it goes against the law or the Constitution.
Okay. All right, fair enough. That was fast.
Yeah, that's the thing is once you are messing with the laws that are supposed to get us all treated equally, that is when I don't think intention matters.
Okay. Ooh, here's one I know you might have opinions about. Where do you think is the most worthwhile place to find meaning in life? Work, family, hobby, religion, philosophy, helping others, all the small miracles, or something else entirely?
What was the beginning part again?
Where do you think is the most worthwhile place to find meaning in life?
Hobbies.
Hobbies.
Yes.
Okay.
Hobbies are a place you go where you've chosen to go. That is where you are going to find truly like-minded people who are pursuing something that makes them happy for the simple fact that it makes them happy. And then one of the beautiful things about hobbies is if you don't have to be talented at your hobby, but if for whatever reason you get really into it and that energy becomes contagious, you can start a business and you can create a platform for more people to be happy.
Okay.
So I decided to meet my boyfriend based on our hobby. Okay, there are plenty of gay men out there, and a lot of them like me. Okay? But when I met someone that was truly and equally as passionate about living things like animals, to me, that was something truly special, truly different, that made me truly happy. And that is a fundamental sharing, I guess, that he and I have. So I say hobbies 100%, because church is some people's hobby.
True. So going kind of with the hobby, and you like mentioned your boyfriend, do you think it's more so then that because you're very much in love with your boyfriend,
yes.
You know? So do you think then, based off of you guys had the same hobbies, that's what brought you together, do you think opposites attract then, or attract? Is that what I say? Yeah, attract then, or do you think it's more important to have more similar interest in order for an attraction like the one you have with your boyfriend to exist?
So opposites provide balance, in my opinion. I'm not going to ever say that I'm an expert in relationships, but I am going to say I waited forever for the right one, and now mine's lasting. So I'm going to go ahead and call myself an authority on patience, which is weird. I'm not a patient person. And how to do things right from a first-timer's perspective. So I believe that things that draw you together should be things that you have in common. Things that keep you together are things that balance each other. If one of you is insanely high-strung and the other one is very, very low and not bothered by external energy, okay, those are opposites. Those go well together. They complement each other. But you have to have something mutual to bring you together, okay? So if you are more of a shallow person, which they're out there and it's not even wrong, I'm sorry, it's just a type of person, and you're attracted to people who are very attractive to you, tens, okay? And then same to say for your significant other, that right there is what drew you together. A love for tens, a desire to only be with a 10.
Right.
Okay, so if both of you are incredibly vain, that's not going to work.
Right.
Okay? There has to be one of you who is going to balance out the other's vanity, or else you're not going to appreciate each other's vanity as much. It's what drew you together, but without a glue that's, a puzzle piece. One of them is a positive image, one of them is a negative image that technically they fit together, right?
Right.
Convex and concave. And those are what binds you together. So, with my boyfriend and I'm a very high-strung person about things dealing with, say, money, financial security, things like that, because I've never been great at it. He's fantastic about it. He's a lot more insecure about, emotional stability and being looked at as somebody who is emotionally unstable. And for me, I get him. So that doesn't matter to me.
Gotcha.
Because I understand his emotional state. So we were attracted by our mutual love for animals, and I would hope that we both had each other very attractive. But the balance is what keeps us inseparable.
Gotcha. Okay, so you're attracted by what's similar, and then you stay together by what's opposite.
Right.
Is basically like what you're saying. Well, I feel like this is getting very interviewy. Are there any of these questions that you're interested in asking or want to talk about or discuss?
Interesting.
There's 202 of them.
Oh my gosh, no kidding. That's why you've just been shooting them at me.
Yeah, there's so many to go. That's why Matthew and I have been doing them so often, because they're just super fun to talk about. I mean, even now I've known you for years, and I feel like I've learned a few new things about you.
Okay, I don't see it on here, but I want to know.
Okay.
How much can you compromise in a relationship, romantic or platonic,
Okay.
before it's just too much? When do you say, I'm not compromising anymore? Because compromise is supposed to be a skill.
Right. Well, to me, it's all dependent on time. So I feel like we kind of discussed this a little bit when you and I were talking about like love and marriage on one of the previous podcasts we did, where it's just in regards to like how much that person is, what that person is doing, and if they're making like steps to change, right? Mm-hmm. I also believe that people deserve chances, even people who do some of the worst things in this world. I believe, unpopular belief, but I do believe a lot of them deserve second chances, and maybe sometimes third, fourth, or fifth chances. But at one point you have to ask yourself, how is this weighing on me? Or is this person actually taking steps to, change maybe certain things that are unhealthy for this relationship, that are very noticeably unhealthy? It's one thing if it's just like, and then it's also like what you choose too, right? If it's something like this person doesn't like this, or this person doesn't like this, that's something I feel like is very petty to get upset about. Mm-hmm. Whereas if it's something like, oh, this person has a drug problem, they need to get that taken care of, then that's a little bit serious. There's less chances to be given there. And I think that's where the compromise comes in. But I don't know, it's such a gray area, because I also have strong beliefs that when you're in a I really hate the term of, you have to work in a relationship. And it's not that I'm not willing to put in work into a relationship, but it's when I get really tired when I see these couples who are constantly fighting or constantly complaining about each other all the time, or whatever it is. And then the excuse is, well, it's a relationship and you have to work at it. Well, love should be work, but love shouldn't be a fucking grind.
Well, I think it should be easy to love someone. Uh-huh. Okay? You should love them.
Right.
The love two people have and the relationship, those are two different things, right? People who love each other get divorced all the time. I love him. We're just not right for each other. Uh-huh. So when is enough enough? Is there a part of you that you lose? You're like, I can't lose that about myself, or
right. Well, and I think that's the problem too, is I feel like a lot of people mistaken love for comfort. If you've been with somebody for 2 years, or hell, let's give it a shorter time. Let's say you've been with somebody for 6 months, right? Mm-hmm. Well, now there's this sense of comfort and familiarity that exists within that relationship. I myself have found myself in relationships that I've been unwilling to end simply because there's a comfort and familiarity with it. And I think a lot of people get into those stages, and then they find themselves in this gray area where is it love or is it familiarity?
So it's a question of why am I still here?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so that's when enough is enough. When it's no
Yes.
longer because I love her or love him.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's just, yeah, why, if you start wondering why am I still here, and the instant answer isn't because I love them. But what I'm arguing is I believe there are people who do ask themselves that question, and they do tell themselves like, oh, it's because I love them. And I would argue that they've become delusional, and what they're considering love at this point is familiarity, but they're skewing the two together.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So it's funny, I'm reading this because we've actually discussed this, and but I like that they gave examples. So the question is, if it was discovered that personality traits were partly genetic and could be removed with gene therapy, would it be ethical to edit out negative character traits that harm others, like extreme aggression, compulsive lying, or cruelty?
Okay. So yeah, so we did talk about this off mic a little bit. So I just don't think you should fuck with any of it. I really don't. I think we, and I can't think of specific examples. I know they're out there, but I think when you start fucking with the natural order of things, and I mean we see it just with bits with like nature and climate change, even, you know, the smallest change, the butterfly effect, right? The smallest changes can lead to the biggest, you know, outcomes, right? So when it comes to something like that, yeah, maybe somebody who's a lot of aggression, because I do believe everybody is, you're meant to feel everything. If you're somebody who's more highly aggressive than maybe the average person, I do think there's a reason for that. There's a natural order as to why you're feeling that way. Some people who believe in God might argue that it's a test. Some people who don't might argue that it's balance, whatever it is. But the second now you take that away, well, your body was meant to develop with that particular personality trait in mind. So now when you take that away, I think you're fucking up the entire system. And me, as somebody who believes everything is balance, I believe that the way our bodies develop and our personalities develop are also based off of balance.
Okay, so
when you take away that aggression, well, now the reason why that person was so aggressive or had that much anger built up in them was to maybe balance something else out that they have in them that they don't even know about. So now that you take away that aggression, maybe that person spends the rest of their life depressed now and doesn't even have the capacity to be happy because you took away this extreme aggression that they had that maybe balanced something out.
Okay, so I'm going to alter the question a little bit and remove the slippery slope possibility. Okay. We're going to say this is for, you know, bettering people's lives, not enriching their lives and making them blue-eyed instead of brown-eyed or anything like that. Okay, we're going to go ahead and remove the slippery slope argument.
Okay.
And say, you know, we've seen that documentary on YouTube of a girl who has such intense Tourette's. Her life is ruined, right? Her whole house is destroyed, and it's just a disaster. Her life is a disaster, and she hits her mom in the face, and she spits at people, and she can't help it. She says sorry afterward and everything, and you remember this, right?
Yes.
Okay. So she ended up having a surgery that cured it.
Yes.
What would be the difference of doing it while she was in the womb versus, you know, fixing her life with the surgery after?
Because one example, you're taking away a personality trait, and the other one, you're taking away a disease.
Right. So what if so would you be okay with taking the disease out when she was in the womb?
Yes. Tourette's, absolutely. But if this person maybe had a predisposition of being a little more angrier than somebody, then
what about a compulsive liar?
Compulsive liar? No, keep that in there. It's a personality trait.
That's not a disease?
I don't consider it one. Do people consider compulsive liar a disease?
Yes, it's in the DSM-4, I believe. It's called something fantastica.
Really?
Yeah.
I had no clue that's something. I mean, maybe, but the problem is like I don't know anybody, or I have never seen anything like of somebody who suffers from this disease of compulsive lying. So I have no clue like what that would even entail. So it kind of goes back to what I've talked about with like depression and anxiety, right? And I think I might put compulsive liar in the same category, where do I believe that chronic depression and anxiety are actual things that people suffer from, and there are people out there who do need the pills to correct that balance in their brain? Absolutely. But do I believe that 98% of them are just really, really sad or really, really anxious and don't have that issue? 100%.
But don't you think that if we saw it as a genetic set, that is a disease? Like alopecia.
Well, it's funny. You wait, what's alopecia?
When you can't grow any hair on your entire body. Nowhere, none in your nose, no brows, so your sweat goes right into your eyes because you have no lashes, none in your ears, so everything goes right into your brain.
I mean, the problem is we talked about taking away the slippery slope. And I think when you talk about things like depression, anxiety, or being a compulsive liar, that is a slippery slope.
But why if you can see a gene for it?
Well, I think I would argue and say that anything that could alter your personality, I would not take away, regardless of whether that was depression, anxiety, compulsive liar, because I think those things are there for a reason. When it's something like Tourette's, or would you call it alopecia? Alopecia. Those are not things that affect your personality, but they can affect your I would argue it could affect your way of living.
Self-confidence, self-worth, the ability to fit in or make friends.
But it comes back to balance, whereas I think there's a reason why there are people out there that don't carry confidence. And I maybe the reason why there are people out there who have less confidence or low self-esteem is so that the people out there who are nurturers have something to nurture. So now, this is just an example. This is one example. So now if you take away all the self-esteem from people, but you don't take away the nurturing from people because that's deemed as a positive trait, well, maybe that's going to affect this great amount of people now who are nurturers because they have nothing to nurture now.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
See, this is why when I meet somebody, I would like to know if they believe in a higher power. Because while you're not incredibly religious, you believe in a higher power, right? And you just mentioned that maybe these people exist so that other people can have, a benefit in their lives. They can bring people together. And that is indicative of a higher power, whether it's just energy that you're putting out in the universe, right? Or God. So, and then how are we doing on time?
I think we're actually reaching the end here. I would love to go further, but Adam does have a day job that he has to go to.
Oh, man.
I know. That was a good one to end on, though. That one really had to make me think. But I mean, just to kind of sum it up, I think anything that has to do with maybe a physical deformity. I don't know. Would you consider Tourette's a physical deformity? Probably not, right?
No. But if you took a picture of someone with Tourette's, you wouldn't have any idea there was anything wrong with
it. True. So, I mean, I guess anything that has to do with, like, how it affects somebody's personality, I would keep regardless of what it is. And then anything like maybe a mental or physical deformity like Tourette's, or not being able to grow hair anywhere, or growing too much hair everywhere, like, those are things that I think are okay to be like, this is going to make this person's life harder. Whereas, like Fair. I said, I think people who are depressed, even people who are born with chronic depression, that I would still argue as a personality trait, I think there's a reason why they're around. We do have pills to help those people. And I think they exist not only for the nurturers, but I think they exist because they bring something to somebody else's life too that, they don't even know yet, or maybe we don't even know yet. So I think when you fuck with that balance, you're fucking with something much higher.
Well, I wish this was a 3-hour podcast, but I do understand.
Oh, we will be on more, sir. I really appreciate having you on today, Justin.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you so much for filling in for Matthew. And thank you guys so much for listening today. Always appreciate the listeners. Remember, you can find us on all the social media platforms. You can still, I think our GoFundMe is still going. So that's www.gofundme.com/Hardly Millennial. And Justin, any final thoughts?
Stay in school and grow a garden.
There you go. Stay in school and grow a garden. All right, guys. Goodbye. We'll see you tomorrow.